What is awakening? Someone asked the question, what is awakening? Although I know you say it's hard to describe. I really want to know. So let me start by asking a few questions. Have you ever felt that something's not quite right with life? Something's not quite right with the universe? Have you ever noticed a gnawing dissatisfaction in life? Do you remember as you became an older child, an adolescent, young adult, there became a solidifying of the thought-based identity? Thoughts became more and more frequent, and you believed them more, and you started believing more in a future that you could imagine and create and control by imagining it. And that seemed like a good idea, but it came along with a side effect of feeling more distanced from life, such that when you think back on childhood, you remember times of pure presence, just playing, enjoying yourself, not having a care in the world. There was wonder in everything. How long has it been since you've felt that? Do you feel it every day? If so, do you feel it all day long? What happened to that wonder? What happened to that presence? What happened to the ability to live life without having to think about how you're living life? Without standing apart from yourself, from your thoughts, your emotions, and feeling like the manager of your life, the one who has to decide, the one whose back is in a corner and has to figure out how to arrange everything the right way so that you can feel okay. When did we start struggling? When did we start struggling with the outside world, with ourself? Now, if the answer to these questions is none of that applies to me, then great. Awakening is probably not something you're going to be interested in. It may be, but it's reasonably unlikely. On the other hand, if when you listen to these questions, something deep inside you resonates with where they point, that indeed you have perceived something not quite right with the way you're perceiving life, yourself, reality, thoughts. But because that's so normal and socially reinforced, you've sort of lost hope that there's another way, that there's a way back to that spontaneity, that wonder, that simplicity, that presence, that depth of living. Well, the promise of awakening is something that often stirs a recognition of that suffering and a remembering of that wonder and the possibility that maybe it hasn't actually gone anywhere. Maybe we've just become too distracted with thoughts, agendas, beliefs, and that distraction has started to feel like a container for our identity. And we've forgotten that a lot of the seeking we're doing, a lot of the mental processes of imagining a better way, a better future, or contemplating ourselves, or contemplating who we are, or why we're here in a way that's uncomfortable, started from a place of fear, a fundamental fear of life, but has turned into something that feels real and solid, even if it feels isolated, dysphoric, uncomfortable. If we recognize that fact and acknowledge our own suffering, then there's a good chance that we'll turn our attention to something deeper, something more primary than the thoughts, something closer than close, something more real than what we've been taking to be real. And when we orient to this, we're well on our way. Then it's a matter of inquiry, a matter of investigating the nature of thought, and specifically identity and how it relates to thought. Or simply resting in the pure sense of I before any thinking occurs, and resting there until a significant transformation in identity occurs. This isn't something I can explain to you in words, because by definition, the words that you're receiving and turning into thoughts and beliefs and mental constructs are the barrier. They are the barrier between what you take yourself to be and the knowing of an infinite space of I or I am, or pure unbound consciousness. So it's not just that it's not describable, it's that living in the world of descriptions and taking yourself to be that world of descriptions, self-descriptions, descriptions shared with others, is the problem itself. That is the challenge. So what is awakening? Awakening is when that seeking, an ongoing process of redefining the self in a cognitive way, in a mental way, stops long enough that identity can disentangle itself from the thoughts. That's what it is. Now, that can only be made into a thought or a concept until it actually occurs. When that occurs, it will be more than obvious that something has occurred, something has shifted. Moreover, an important point I want to make in this video is you don't have to know what awakening is to orient toward awakening, to want to wake up. In fact, you can't know what awakening is before awakening. It's not going to happen. It's impossible. It's literally impossible. Also, if there's frustration around that, if you believe I want to know what awakening is so I can decide whether or not I want it, you're fooling yourself, because that's just rebinding your identity into thoughts. That's the seeking I'm referring to. Also, if you think that you can cause awakening to happen by understanding what it is, that's never going to happen. Again, that's preventing the awakening. So the ego is very sneaky. The thought structures can be very, very sneaky. They can tell us that we want something we don't actually want. Or they can tell us to look in the wrong place. When it comes to this topic, looking in thoughts, the content of thoughts, in the way that we're used to, in the way that is uncomfortably comfortable, isn't going to do it. That's not going to work. You can inquire into the nature of a thought, one thought at a time, or the nature of who you are that's aware of the thoughts. Or, forgetting thoughts altogether, just inquire into the nature of who am I? What is the nature of the sense of being me? All of those are entry points, but understanding awakening isn't necessary to wake up. Understanding what awakening is just not going to happen before awakening. It's impossible. You might have a very good mental description of it, but it's not going to be what awakening is. Also, I have a book on this that is 500 plus pages describing this process. So if anyone's truly interested in awakening, I would recommend that. And I have 2 playlists in this channel about awakening. So hopefully that gives a little insight into the question, what is awakening? And why knowing what it is cognitively is not only not helpful, it's really a distraction. So if one is truly and authentically interested in awakening, I wouldn't recommend trying to formulate a definition or a clear idea or description of what awakening is, because it's just not going to work for you. Instead, inquire into who you are. Who are you that doubts your thoughts? Who are you that feels like you're in control of thoughts, if you do? Or who are you that feels like you're bombarded with thoughts? Who's aware of the thoughts right now? Who's aware of these words? Who or what is at the center of your experience? It seems like you should be able to find it, right? So look for it, experientially. Don't worry about awakening. That's the way to proceed if you're really interested in it. If you find it distasteful, that's fine. There's no reason to pursue it. But trying to understand it or have a precise definition to satisfy yourself just won't work. Because the satisfaction that the ego is looking for is just the seeking that's keeping attention off of the fact that we've distanced ourselves from our true nature.